The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on an initiative called Engineering with Nature. It all started in 2010. And this is the EWN Podcast. EWN is developing and implementing nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It's bringing together a growing international community of scientists, engineers, and researchers from all kinds of disciplines that are committed to harnessing the power of nature to solve problems. The EWN Podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
Imagine transforming a 51-mile-long concrete river that runs right through the heart of the Los Angeles Basin in California. What if this river could be restored to become a vibrant corridor, reconnecting fractured communities and ecosystems? Today, we're talking with two really brilliant landscape architects about how they're using storytelling, augmented reality, and virtual reality tools to engage people along the river in co-creating a new future for themselves and for the river. And as you'll hear, both the river and the communities are at a critical crossroad. Welcome to Season 7, Episode 7. I am here with my frequent co-host, Amanda Tritinger, Deputy Lead of the Engineering with Nature program. Amanda, this episode was your idea.
Hey, Sarah. Yeah, it sure was. And I'm really excited to give Leslie and Alex here a platform to just share the really cool and truly state-of-the-art research and work they've been doing out in their laboratory. I was lucky enough back a few years ago to visit Alex in his lab and see the opportunities that he and others were creating in a really kind of novel way that I hadn't seen before.
We're so excited to have you here today. Alex Robinson is Associate Professor at the University of Southern California School of Architecture in the Department of Landscape Architecture. He's a landscape architect, a researcher, and a scholar. And I think he's also quite a visionary. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Amanda. And happy to have you, Leslie, here as well.
And Leslie Dinkin is a landscape design coordinator based in Los Angeles. She has literally just graduated with dual master's degrees in landscape architecture and heritage conservation from the University of Southern California. She studied under Alex and worked really closely with him at the Los Angeles River Integrated Design Lab that we'll be talking about in a minute. She has a really brilliant future ahead of her. Hey, welcome, Leslie.
Hey, Sarah. Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
We've got a lot to talk about. Before we get into it all, Alex, tell us a little bit about your work and tell us what you're passionate about.
Thank you, Sarah and Amanda, and thank you for having us on this platform. I really appreciate the support of EWN and the being seen by you guys. The work that I do is largely rooted in my own experience of the city and of infrastructures like the Los Angeles River, where I was very excited just to find how interesting these are as landscapes, as places for people to spend their days, to make their lives, to create art as a medium for all sorts of culture. And my work, is split between these two parts where, one, I'm really interested in identifying these places as incredible landscapes. And two, I'm thinking, how do we actually design these things effectively and in a way that brings together all of the assets that society has and that really works hard on all levels to fulfill the potential that they have as a landscape, as a place in the city. Because I think a lot of infrastructures have been designed just to do one thing, and they happen to actually become a really cool landscape along the way, or somewhat interesting, like the Los Angeles River, against all odds, really. And so how do we actually design these things? And I think it's just a really difficult thing to do. So I'm passionate in finding ways to do that. It takes the community, it takes many different disciplines, and it takes a lot of advanced research and just a lot of work. And it also just takes time where you go out and you understand these places. You just have to know them, you experience them. which I think we'll learn more about with Leslie work.
Certainly. Thanks, Alex. Leslie, tell us a little bit about how you came to be working on your combined master's thesis with Alex as your faculty advisor.
So I grew up in Los Angeles, and following high school, I went to college in Colorado and worked as an outdoor educator for a number of years in the Rocky Mountains. And there I would take students up 14,000-foot mountains. We would swim in alpine lakes. But the longer I spent in these places, the more I felt that I was teaching students that connection to place or connection to nature or the outdoors only happened when you were way out there, when you couldn't see any people or buildings. But this is not where the majority of people live. And so it was this idea that prompted me to return home to LA to pursue a degree, a master's degree in landscape architecture and urbanism. And after 1 year in that program, I started a second degree in heritage conservation. I realized pretty quickly into grad school that I couldn't design anything new if I didn't learn everything that was there before. And so extensive research and storytelling and listening to community stories quickly became a part of my practice. Alex was one of my first professors in school. I had him multiple times. I worked for him for 2 years. He's an advisor on my own project, 51 Miles, that we'll talk about later. But on one of our first days of class, he actually took us all on a walk along the Los Angeles River. And pretty immediately, despite spending very little time there as a child, I found myself effortlessly curious about it, kind of like Alex, just as its potential to be a public connective corridor running through so many different neighborhoods in LA, somehow symbolizing life and death at the same time. I just find it endlessly fascinating.
I love that. So a walk on the rivers actually changed the whole course of your life and it's shaping your career. I love that. Let's talk about the Los Angeles River. That was the focus of your thesis. I read it. I thought it was just excellent, but I thought, wow, it's a really long, sad story. As you described, the LA Rivers had a rather disturbing history. Put some of that history in perspective for us, Leslie, and talk about some of the challenges.
So before it was the Los Angeles River that we know today, it was known to the local Gabrielino Tongva tribe as Paime Pait, or the West River, which was a meandering transient body of water that brought alluvial rich soils to the LA Basin. It has been described as lush and an oasis, life-giving. However, as settlers arrived and developed the region, they built right within the floodplain, seeing the river as a line, and eventually it became a threat. And its natural variability that once brought all of this fertile soil to LA posed risks of flooding to residents. The floods of 1936 and 1938 were particularly notable because they both caused widespread destruction throughout the entire city.
Mm-hmm.
The flood of 1938 killed 100 people and destroyed 6,000 structures. And so in response to the threat, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began a monumental project encasing the entire river, 51 miles in concrete, to protect the surrounding urban sprawl. It took 20 years, and the massive undertaking severed the river's connection to its groundwater and essentially erased its identity as a living waterway. So since then, the singular purpose of the river has been truly to defend the city from flooding, channeling all of the rainwater from Canoga Park to Long Beach straight into the Pacific, with freeways constructed both above it and beside it.
It took a long time until people decided that something needed to be done with this river. Alex, you were really involved in the LA River Revitalization Master Plan. Can you talk a little bit about that and how people came together?
I came out of graduate school to work on the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan in 2005. And that was one of the first plans to bring a lot of different values together in terms of thinking about how we can transform the river. There's been a lot of master plans before and after. And so we've been working on this river for many decades now, and trying to make a change, widen the floodplain, make the river at the center of the city, identify it as a place for recreation and transport and for our lives to play out. And that was a really formative experience for me. I wandered along the whole river, mapped out the river, spent time with different communities all along the river. And that began a trajectory where I was fascinated with trying to find a way in which we could really begin to make and catalyze change. We've made a lot of plans, and I was just really excited to see the Army Corps take on that master plan and start the Arbor study and the Los Angeles River Ecosystem study. But we still haven't seen a lot of progress. And I think that as a researcher and a professor of landscape architecture in Los Angeles, I was like, this is really something I should be working on. There's not many of us here doing this kind of research. So I dug into it and thought about how do we begin to like kind of tip the needle towards change. And I think that what I was seeing as a practitioner was that we didn't really have a good collective understanding of where we were or where we could go. And we were really constrained by a lot of major issues. And there were so many voices and so many different constituents, all speaking different languages, all in their own silos, all sort of having a different vision, not understanding what was really possible. I thought, what if we could bring together all these voices and create a platform where we had a more collective understanding, where people could begin to speak the same language and were able to co-create something. The Army Corps had made these incredible physical models of the Los Angeles River, hydraulic models, open air models in parks in Griffith Park. And you see like 4 engineers around that model. And I was like, wow, what if everyone had been involved with that model and had been able to participate in that process? How different would this river been? That was a really formative moment for me. So I became really interested in like physically modeling the river.
Why was that important?
One of the things that people don't understand is the critical flood protection that the river provides. And it's really hard to make changes if you don't really work carefully in a close feedback loop with that parameter of flood protection. So you can't really imagine things effectively unless you understand that. And you had this disconnect where you had all these people who were just imagining all sorts of amazing, incredible things, but they don't really understand the hydrology, nor should they. You know, they don't have the tools. So can I bring those two sides together? Can we have the imaginative artists working with the engineers that are keeping the city safe in a way that allowed for a real imaginative practice?
An interesting idea, but certainly challenging.
The perverse thing about it, something like the LA River and other kind of like so-called wicked problems, is that you have this situation where you have so many constraints. You know, the flood control channel is very constrained in many ways. You can't make big changes. That you've got this actual, real, almost perverse need for imaginative solutions. Yet at the same time, it's so hard to have an imaginative solution or even design process in that situation. So how do you kind of create a situation where you can imagine at the scale of rivers and cities with these infrastructures that have such critical function? How do you create an imagination, like a fertile imagination?
So you can see how this just clearly aligns with engineering with nature. I think Alex just touched on the kind of heart and beat of engineering with nature, where we see this, what some people might see as this complex problem, Alex and his team identify as a community-based, beautiful solution. We've heard already 2 stories from just 2 people, 2 voices today who have been completely, their lives affected by this LA River. They're not going to give up on it. The community doesn't want to give up on it. And it's an opportunity to bring nature, to bring the community, to bring the art and the soul of the community to the forefront.
So how did you and the EWN program get connected with Alex?
Alex reached out to the Research and Development Center and got himself on our radar, because we do have these models, and we have numerical models, we have physical models. We've been doing our best to bring those 2 together to talk to each other. But how do we bring them to the people? How do we get them to talk to the people? We typically will fly the districts in to see the models in person, and that's very effective if they can make it. But we found that if you aren't touching the water, if you're not feeling, if you're not having that one-on-one impact with the model itself, you walk away without that connection. Leslie and Alex have done a really great job is not only creating that connection, but making that connection meaningful, doing the research, bringing the voices in, reaching out to the art, the people of their communities, and making that a part of the solution.
Absolutely.
And that's why USACE and EWN have found this opportunity with Alex, the design lab. And maybe, Alex, you could talk more about the lab and about your model.
Yeah, Alex, the suspense is killing us. We want to understand everything about the model, how it works, and then we want to talk about how you get people involved in it. So tell us about the model.
We built a physical model, a hydraulic model, in the city of Los Angeles' Hydraulic Analysis Laboratory. And I just have to shout out to the Bureau of Engineering in Los Angeles for giving us this laboratory for now. I think we're getting it for 8 years, maybe longer. We have an MOU with them. And it's this incredible facility right next to the river, which just happens to be where it is. And we've built this 70-foot model. It's 1 inch equals 10 feet. So it's a little over 1.5 miles of river that we've out of 51 miles. And we've modeled this section of the river that is right next to this incredible set of parcels where we can imagine really making big changes. It's the crown jewel opportunity for changing the LA River. And it's something that the city bought and has imagined this potential of building an island there and radically transforming the river and changing the floodplain. And so we built this model with the help of CHL, Coastal Hydraulics Laboratory. They were awesome. They milled pieces of the model and sent it to us in LA. When we assembled this model, the model is familiar to a lot of people who do hydraulic models, just as far as the model itself, except we built this really special rail on the edge that represents the context of the community out of riparian salvaged wood that we got from a local lumber jack in the city. Anyway, so we have the model is flowing water, but then we've been thinking about it as landscape architects, like this is an incredible natural exhibit. It has so much potential already. How do we take it to the next level? How do we make it into something that really invites people to participate in it? And also, how does it represent the problem? All parts of it, all voices, all together. And then how does it become something that is fun to design with, that allows for an imaginative process?
I think the model is absolutely fabulous, and we'll make sure that we include the video of it in our show notes. I understand you're using augmented reality. Tell us a little bit about what that is and how you're using it on this project with this model.
So I'm glad you asked that. It's been really kind of unexpected and exciting part of this project is that we discovered augmented reality as an incredible tool for a physical model. Augmented reality works with an iPad or a headset where you can overlay information on top of a physical object. So you've maybe seen this with, I don't know, it's kind of popping up everywhere, but like Snapchat or something like that. So it lets us overlay any kind of information we want over the model. So you can see the model and you can see all different kinds of information. And the things that this does for us is it lets us create a different map of what we're seeing. So we can show more than just what is physically there. We can show all sorts of data layers and community voices and other information and make a kind of different base for what we create. So I think that it's absolutely critical that we rethink the base map for these projects. Where does this project end? Who's part of it? What wisdom, what voices, what data becomes a part of the solution? So the augmented reality does that. It also has all sorts of really fun, this is all the masterwork of my colleague, Andreas Kratky, in the School of Cinematic Arts, and his students. It lets people interact and they can draw on the model, in 3 dimensions using this tool, and they can make comments, and those comments will persist so that you have this incredible opportunity where a community member can come in there and make a comment, draw something, and then that becomes something that an engineer and a landscape architect are, consider in their design process. And that kind of connection is it's made, but it's like we're making it in a different way, and I think a really fun way.
That's just so cool. And it's something, I was doing some work for the Army Corps recently on visualization, and it's something that people were talking about in the abstract, and you guys are actually doing it. I mean, that's just so cool. Leslie, I know that you were involved in building the model and also designing some interesting interactive components. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I haven't seen Alex in a couple months since graduating, so it's so fun to hear, about the model from this point of view and learn from it and see how it has evolved over time. But I worked with another student, Nina Whitehorn, on designing the vegetation on the model. And so if you look at a photo of it, it's all of the very colorful hexagon silicone pieces that are kind of littered all over the model. And we wanted to design a system that could replicate the drag of vegetation on river flow at a reduced scale. So while all ensuring that it's highly tactile, interactive, and user-friendly, as Alex was talking about, having it be fun was really important. We considered the qualities of a model railroad and the joy of selecting and positioning different objects and altering the train tracks. So in positioning the vegetation in different places, you would alter the flow of water. And the prototype needed to securely adhere to the model when subjected to rushing water. We experimented with a number of iterations and colors. The colors needed to be detected by the AR system. And so in creating this small little thing, it ended up having a very complicated iterative process. But since then, the lab has created over 2,000 individual silicone pieces, and they're all magnetic and they adhere to the model with magnetic paint. Alex provided us so much time to experiment and play around with a ton of different materials. And so I think we ended up coming up with something really unique.
Oh, that's so cool. And so when you have community people come in and use the model, they can actually place these things in the model and see what the impact is on the flow of water.
Exactly.
It's just amazing.
There's bins of different sizes, and each size is a different color. And so you can really play around and place them all. And because they're magnetic, it's just very easy to pick them up and plop them somewhere else.
And see the impact immediately.
And there's cameras now. Our engineer, Matul Lahar, has designed this camera system above the entire thing that tracks where the vegetation is and does analysis so that you can determine whether you can keep track of what designs you've created, and you can also do analysis of how much vegetation you've created and how much you've improved it upon the last iteration or changed it. That's something that we're working on right now, but that system will do a variety of different kinds of analyses.
As a modeler, that is just so exciting to hear. And it's really with the state of the art. And Leslie, as a gamer and someone who did their dissertation on coefficient of drag, you have the keys to my heart with that. I love to hear this.
Leslie did an amazing job, I gotta say. It was really extraordinary work. It just didn't seem like could not figure out how to make these things or how it would stick or any of these things. It just was I couldn't have thought, there wasn't a better person for this job, obviously. Figured it out.
It was fun. You really had to trust the process. We bought a 3D printer and made so many different types of molds. And I would every week would be like, Alex, I need more resin. For a year, I think it took us a year to figure out how to make the hexagons.
It's just a huge accomplishment, Leslie. Alex, can you talk a little bit about what you're learning from these experiences with the model, both as a researcher and an academic?
Well, that's interesting to talk about what we're learning, because it's a project like no other in the sense that I've never opened the doors as wide as this project in terms of opening it to all different voices and really powerful tools and the water itself is a powerful voice in this project. We are opening the door to the hydraulics in a way that I don't know what's going to happen exactly. I don't know what the answers are. And, we're also opening the door to the voices of the community. We just had an event with our partner Clock Shop, an arts organization that we have a placemaking grant with the NEA. And they brought a whole group of people in that were from all different backgrounds. They interacted with the model, and we had a different kind of conversation. The project was based around this question: what does water want? And we had this fascinating conversation, and it was like, a journey and an adventure for me to get into this space with all these different people. And I think it's going to continue to be this really wild journey where we're just setting up a kind of platform for something to happen. But at the same time, we are science. We're some scientists and researchers. I'm a kind of an in between, an artist and a researcher and a designer. But we are trying to answer particular questions that we can, verify. So we have a social scientist that's working with us, and we have human subject testing protocols, so that we bring in focus groups. We test, are these tools creating an inclusive environment or an inclusive process? Does AR help make people feel more included in the process? That's something that we're really interested in doing. And so we do these very focused things. And so far we've had a set of 7 focus groups, and everyone thought they were really excited about the tools, and they felt included. But I think we've got a lot more to learn.
It's an ongoing learning process for sure. I want to talk about I found really amazing initiative that's part of this whole river restoration project. I want to talk about, Leslie, your very personal and I might say very intimate connection with the LA River. Can you share a bit about the 51 Miles project with us?
So we are a team of students, a photographer and a documentarian. And in August of this past year, we decided to walk along the entire Los Angeles River, so all 51 miles over 6 days. We had a lot of support. Alex is our faculty advisor, and we had a USC Arts in Action grant and the USC Presidential Bolts Leadership Sustainability grant. But it was amazing. We each walked with our own inquiry in mind. One of us was focused on ecology and mapping, another urbanism and access. I was thinking about heritage conservation and narrative ethnography. And we really documented the river from the headwaters in Canoga Park to the estuary in Long Beach. We were really curious how people adapt to a space that wasn't designed for them. And we're really interested in seeing what plants have emerged through the concrete. And then to simply walk next to the river, we had to jump over fences, just trespass a little bit on county line and disguise ourselves as engineers. We were curious what it takes to walk next to this river that runs through the middle of our city.
So you said in the introduction to your project that you walked through landscapes not meant for humans, and you witnessed the changing river mile by mile. Paint us a picture of some of the things that you saw on your journey.
Yeah, I think a really strange sort of relationship has emerged between the social, industrial, and ecological along the river. Every mile looks different than the mile before. There's many different typologies of the river. Some of it is entirely concrete. Some of it has a soft bottom, and so vegetation is allowed to grow in those areas. But it's not just that they're allowed to grow. It's literally like it bursts out of the seams. It's like a wave, a tsunami of forest that comes out of the ground. And these transition points, I think, really blur the lines between, what is nature and what is the city. And it kind of transports you to a very different place in Los Angeles. And so we saw thousands of birds enjoying accidental algae mats that are created from water that spilled over onto the flat bed of concrete. We saw trees bursting out of cracks in the ground and groundwater that bubbles up through cracks in the concrete that was designed, to keep it hidden away forever. We saw so many different people using the river in just interesting ways. We saw people fishing. We talked to one man who had pulled a mattress from his truck bed and just pulled it out into the Glendale Narrows and was just sitting in the shade. We talked to some people that were like, yeah, we just come here every weekend because it's the central point to where we all live and shade is free. And so I think even though it wasn't designed for people have really found a way to make it their own. And then Alex with his model is trying to figure out how to do that even more. You know, how can we bring people to the river?
Such an astonishing experience for you. It's hard to imagine. Tell me what you've been doing to really process your truly profound Riverwalk experience.
Yeah, it's been a really fun process to digest all of the information that we all gathered. Nina Whitehorn collected soil samples. Hannah, Michael Flynn really documented all different sorts of access points in intentional or, adapted access points along the river. Rio Ash Phoenix took over 500 film photographs of the river. And then Camille Shushani, I think, took like 30 hours of footage, maybe more, 100, I don't know. And we are in the process of making a book and a documentary with all of that information. And then I documented a lot of different stories and wrote about the journey. And so by the end of the year, we should have a 90-minute feature of our walk, which will be our chronological journey, but we're also interviewing tons of people right now who we just find along the river or different experts, and to include all of their voices in the movie. And then we're thinking about climate change and climate grief, and this space is kind of at the forefront of that. There's some spaces that feel so hot and desolate and other spaces that feel really lush, and it kind of gives you an idea of what will happen eventually to the rest of the planet, maybe. The book will be another way to digest this information and really let other people know about the river in a really beautiful way.
And you've got a number of events coming up. You've done some events. You've got more coming up. Talk a little bit about those, because I thought they were really interesting.
We are partnered with Friends of the Los Angeles River, and through this partnership have hosted 2 different story slams, one at Frogtown Brewery and one at their River Festival. And 17 different storytellers. We had a Gabrielino cultural keeper, kayakers, city ecologists share their personal connection to the river with a really large audience of people. I think for these people, the river is part of their everyday, but for most Angelinos, I've heard it as described as unknown as an Arctic glacier. So it really allowed people in to share those experiences and hear, the way people are interacting with the river today.
Those are really cool ways to get folks invested in the river, and many different opportunities here that you've listed. I would love to go to Riverfest. That sounds awesome. You said there's 17 different community storytellers. Are there any key themes to these stories they tell?
I think everyone is surprised by their connection with the river, which I kind of love. Like, I feel like a lot of people have a similar story as mine and Alex's, where they didn't know about the river and they were introduced to the river and then fell in love with it and continue to go back. And that was definitely a theme that I noticed throughout all of them. And we're hoping to have more. I think we're in the midst of planning another. And so hopefully the 17 storytellers can grow to 100 or more.
Wow, love that.
So really strong values shared by these folks and their messages. Alex, talk a little bit about the value of activities like story slams and in advancing engagement on the project.
I think it's awesome what Leslie's doing, and I really admire her courage to just really gather the community and do these things, because I'm more comfortable doing the solo walk along the river than having this a big event. But I think that what I've learned, studying landscapes, all different kinds of landscapes, is that a lot of them start with a walk. They start with something as simple as a single person, as a story. The legend of the Los Angeles River is that Lewis McAdams in 1985 broke into the LA River with some friends, and then eventually started the Friends of the LA River, which has been totally formative in the revitalization. It also happened that the Tillman reclamation plant started dumping water into the river at the same year. It was the confluence of a poet taking a walk and this infrastructural happenstance that created the revitalization that we see here. So I think what's really amazing about Leslie's work is that it recognizes how much landscapes are driven by these individual experiences, these stories that happen on the ground, these serendipitous moments that people have in landscapes and places. And she's building upon that as a kind of, I think it's as a kind of bulwark against planning as usual, top-down planning where it's hard not to kind of simplify things and do top-down planning with something as big as the LA River. But it would be a great tragedy if we fix the LA River by ultimately kind of wiping out and to make it into something that was a simplistic version of a river and didn't identify and bring in these voices that are so interesting and are making the river into something that is really reflective and embodying the city's spirit. We need Leslie to champion these voices so that they become part of this redesign. Otherwise, we're just going to, have some curving forms and steps, and we're going to lose this like pretty incredible culture that has been written into this kind of slightly forbidden space. It's actually been a really exciting cultural medium for the city because it's not a park, it's not totally a flood control channel. It's this space in between where we can explore, we can have different kinds of engagements where there's nature and where we can really reimagine things.
I'd like to ask you both, really, what's the one big thing that you've been learning about how advanced visualization supports community engagement in the co-creation of solutions? Alex, maybe we can start with you.
We've kind of opened the door to a big learning process. I think that the model and all the accoutrement, all the different tools that we've created has created this incredible common ground for people to have a conversation where everyone is heard. And that is something that I think that is enabled by the various tools that we have that allows different kinds of people, different groups to have their language, to have their ideas and values represented in the system. And I think that the advanced tools allow for a kind of a much deeper and richer understanding of everything that's happening. And what it does is essentially it kind of relieves each constituent, each person of having to understand and explain everything that they care about in terms of the river and put that out on the map and have this really compelling, exciting representation and platform for their ideas. And it puts it all out there. So it kind of like, you're kind of like, and now I can think about other things. I can have some different thoughts. I can imagine things. I can have a conversation. I feel a little bit represented and I can trust that this tool is going to tell the story. So I think an engineer who's like, I'm trying to save your lives here. We need to protect us from flooding. It's like, well, finally someone's got this story told here, and then hopefully an artist also feels that way too.
If I could just represent all of engineers for a minute, thank you. Thank you for helping us communicate. We've been trying, but sometimes the numbers don't do it. So we so appreciate the efforts that you bring to this practice.
New methods and tools. And Leslie, how about you? What's been the big learning for you from your work on this LA River project?
I think Alex really touched on it, but really learning from other people. I think there's so much to learn from social learning, and everyone is really coming to the table with different ideas of what they want to see. You have the engineer that wants to save your lives. You have the ecologist that wants to see steelhead trout back in the river. And how do you balance both of those priorities without really minimizing either people's worries or hopes and dreams? And so I think that the model is such a beautiful idea because it really asks and encourages all these sorts of different people to be in one space. You actually need to be in a physical space together, and then you're playing with each other, which really allows for communication and talking and sharing and laughing, which I think takes like the heightened pressure a little bit, or relieves some of the heightened pressure that you feel when you're talking about this 51-mile river that runs through 44 different neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and instead really just allows people to be people and, play. And then from there, you can kind of think about what is next. And so I guess what you can learn from one another when you actually listen is probably the biggest thing I've taken away from this project.
The model lets everybody's points of view be validated. Everybody can participate, and everybody's point of view has value in the work.
Yeah, last time I was on here, we talked about engineering with empathy. And I think the key to empathy is listening and hearing those points of view, giving people a platform to speak and share. And today we've heard 17 at least, great examples of what giving those platforms to the people looks like and how we can listen better.
And how it really advances the project. I totally agree with you. Before we let you go, I'd like to ask you both what's up for you folks in the future. And Leslie, maybe we'll start with you.
I just started a new job at Kounkuey Design Initiative 2 weeks ago, and they really focus in community engaged design. So I'm really excited to bring some of these practices I learned with Alex there. And then, of course, finishing the movie and the book about our river walk.
And having your formal graduation.
Yes, yes, I will. I have informally graduated, but I will walk in May.
Well, congratulations. And Alex, how about you? What's ahead for you and the Design Lab?
Well, right now we're working on this NEA grant with Clockshop, our arts organization partner, to do a cultural asset mapping. And that it also involves bringing in artists and programming the model with where they're in charge. They get to decide what to do with this model and these set of tools. And then we're looking right now at doing an NSF grant or some other research project where we're going to do a very focused project where we study these tools and how well they work, and also model this island that the city wants to put into the river, see how it works.
Alex and Leslie, thank you so much for sharing this really groundbreaking work that the two of you have been doing with your colleagues to engage multiple stakeholders, multiple members of the LA River communities to really co-create a better, healthier future for the river and all of the communities that are connected to it. I think your work is just truly inspirational, and you and your colleagues are certainly leaders in innovative infrastructure, redesign, and stakeholder engagement. We're going to be watching what you're doing very closely. So thank you for sharing your passion and your work with us, Alex.
Thank you so much, Sarah, Amanda. Really appreciate this platform.
And Leslie, we just wish you continued success as you start your career. We know you're going to be a brilliant landscape architect.
Thank you both. That means so much. Yeah, thanks for having us both on here.
And Amanda, I have to say, you really picked great guests. Thanks for suggesting that we invite Alex and Leslie to join us on the EWN podcast.
Oh, the key to it, Sarah, is being selfish. Once you meet someone like Alex or Leslie, you can't get enough. So got to invite them back. I just want to get more. I want to hear more. I want to listen more. And I can't appreciate enough the idea of listening to the river and what it wants.
I love that. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you'll join us again as we talk about engineering with nature.
You've been listening to the EWN podcast, developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, for more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN podcast is produced by Eye Contact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.